I'm not sure if you all know, but this is called Drawing Down the Gods Trance Possession, and it is a workshop designed to achieve that state. If you are uncomfortable at any stage, please feel free to leave. And if there are any questions before we go into it, please ask now. Is that okay by everyone?
Is this a note-taking class?
You can take notes,
right.
because I will be. This whole class is based on a technique that the Crescent Crown Goddess, or one of the deities of my tradition, gave to us. So the technique we freely give, it's not oath-bound material. She intended it that way. So if it's useful to you, please do write it down. So get comfortable where you're sitting, in whichever way is right for you. But it would be great if the spine is erect to channel the flow of the life force, and the feet were flat on the ground. So close your eyes and just observe your breath. Just become cognizant of the fact that you are breathing now. And as you watch your breath, gradually deepen and prolong each breath until you are breathing right down into your abdomen, extending it as far as it will go naturally, and into the lungs, and then let out through the mouth, collapsing the lungs and then the abdomen. Let this become a gradual rhythm. If it helps, you can count your breath, counting to the count of 4 on the inhale, holding to the count of 4, releasing to the count of 4, and holding to the count of 4. If that rhythm helps guide you, please follow it. If it also helps, you can visualize the light you are channeling as a particular color. White light or gold light is often used, but whatever personally works for you. As you are breathing, the only thing that you are conscious of is your breath. And all thoughts are dispersing now. Feel the earth under your feet, feel its sustenance, its foundation, feel how it supports you. Send down roots as if your feet and your legs become the limbs of a tree, and entwine and deepen down into the belly of the mother. There they are held by her sanctuary, by her grace. And feel supported and whole and nourished by the mother force. You now place your attention just above the crown of your head. And you visualize and see limbs and boughs and branches entwining to the heavens above. They stretch into the limitless arc of space that we call heaven or universe. And down from the silver-lit campfires of the heavenly ones we draw down the silver light. And we let it sate every need and every desire within our body now. And as you relax, consciously let go of the tension you hold in the muscles and in the joints. Unlock your knees, let your shoulders drop, let your face muscles relax, let everything relax. Let the sky and the earth meet in the center of your being. And watch your heartbeat, hear it. It It is your pure center, now and here. Now we're going to take 3 deep breaths, and on each exhalation we're going to sigh. And we're going to sigh out all of the worry of the day, all of the tire of the day. So this is the first breath. Breathe in deeply. Let it out with a sigh. Breathe in deeply. Let it out with a sigh. This last one. Breathe in deeply. And let it out with a sigh. Blessed be. When you're ready and you're comfortable, just bring your focus and your gaze back into this space now.
You're a good boy.
And I'm just going to form a circle for now. And again, most of you would know, if you do need to leave, just cut your way out in the way that you know how. So this will just help energetically seal what we're doing here.
Does Daddy want to talk to me?
Think about how you say what your actions are.
Black spirits and white, red spirits and grey, come ye, that may, throughout and about, around and around, the circle be drawn, the circle be bound. O circle of art, I conjure thee, by queen of witches, Hecate. O circle of art, I conjure thee, by queen of witches, Hecate. As above, so below, to and from us all things flow. The circle is cast, and we are between all the world.
Yes.
So motive.
Yeah, let me talk to Daddy, okay? I love you.
By the air that is our breath, by the fire of our bright spirit, by the water of our living womb, by the earth that is her body, by the spirit that joins the four and makes them one, we are bound and blessed in timelessness, so magic.
So magic.
So before we get into the nitty-gritty and the technicalities and the specifics of what we're here to do, I just want to gauge our personal experiences with what I call spirit possession, which a lot of people in the Wiccan and Neo-Pagan community also call drawing down. Some people call it aspecting, others would assimilate it and parallel it with channeling. It has many names and many guises, and it's a very sacred act in many traditions. It's both indigenous and of the modern persuasion of the revived or readapted traditions as well. So we'll go Joshua, we'll go clockwise. The beginning, my left.
No, your spirit.
It's okay. And if you have none, just pass it on.
I've seen it running lots of times. Church.
I've read about it. I've done it before for a ritual, and also when the spirit comes to me.
Yes, absolutely.
In general.
I have read about it and seen it done, and I've had it happen spontaneously, but never actually been trained technically in it.
I'm fairly experienced with it.
Wonderful. Now I'm just going to share my little bit of experience and background and why I feel very strongly about this particular subject and why I am here today teaching it and sharing this particular technique. I was born in Bali. For those of you who don't know where that is, it is an island in the archipelago of Indonesia, which is the largest archipelago in the world of islands. It has something like 250,000 islands. It's in Southeast Asia, so very close to Australia, where I live. My father's Balinese, so I have that lineage. My grandmother, who passed when I was 2, and my grandfather, who passed early this year, of my Balinese heritage, were both holy people in their villages. So that is a term that in other places in the world would be considered equivalent to the word shaman, or to the word, medicine man, medicine woman, the multiplicity of words we have, and to witch in a kind of broader context. Although in honor of their culture, I don't call them witches, I call them holy people in the way that their people call them holy people. Now, their tradition and custom of spirit possession was always spontaneous, although they knew it was going to happen, because generally speaking in Bali at a ceremony the spirits are very much present and very vividly so, and at least 3 people will be be spontaneously possessed or performing vessel work at those ceremonies. Generally speaking, it tends to be, in Bali at least, the wandering spirits of the dead, of your ancestors, very similar to the voodoo traditions and to the Santeria traditions, Candomblé, the Afro-Cuban diaspora. But occasionally deities will choose to manifest that way, and so will demons. In Bali, we don't have the dichotomy or duality of good and evil. There is, I think as you were saying today about the African original belief, is that there's a whole spectrum. The word demon, we know the word demon originates originally from a Greek word which simply meant little god, lesser divinity. So the way the Balinese term demons is they're not so kind, they're more chaotic forces of nature, that if we don't placate, tend to enjoy and revel in destroying the order of things. So that's the Balinese understanding. I personally don't work with demons, so I'll state that now. And I personally don't work overtly with the Balinese tradition, although I grew up with it. My tradition is European craft, and I'm influenced by many backgrounds, including Stregoria, various forms of British traditional Wicca, and the fairy tradition, the reclaiming tradition, as well as the tradition that I'm a priest in, which is the Wildwood tradition, which mostly is centered in Australia but has a coven in England. We consider ourselves hugely shamanic. And the definition of witchcraft that we apply most often is that witchcraft is an ecstasy-driven, earth-based mystery tradition. There are three elements in that. I'll explain that briefly. Ecstasy-driven. The Greek origin of the word ecstasy is ekstasis, which is actually hugely relevant to the practice of drawing down. Ekstasis is two words. It means outside standing, or to stand outside oneself, to stand outside one's ego, the bounds of the ego. And the ego, all the ego is the function in our spirit that says, I am this. You know, it's what gives you your identity. The ego is not a bad or negative thing in and of itself. If it's overinflated, it does become so. And if it is underinflated, we get low self-esteem, we get victim mentalities, we get a whole range of emotional and psychological disorders, if you will. Same way with the extreme of overinflation. The ego is there, though, to help create a boundary of contrast between the experience of self and the experience of all self. So when we're dealing with ecstasy, we're dealing with that transition. So an altered state of consciousness, which is the hallmark of shamanism the world over, and it's often said to be the defining factor of what shamanic tradition is: the altering one's consciousness through ecstatic technique. So ecstatic technique can often mean it always involves rhythm, because again I love the origins of words. So I'll explain that the word rhythm comes from the Greek re, which means to flow. So whenever you have a rhythm in something, like with the chanting, with drumming, with dancing, with rocking back and forth, with whatever technique you're using, there is a flow to it. When you have a flow, the energy moves. It just moves very well, and one has no trouble in altering consciousness. Consciously so. So it can happen spontaneously. There are so many triggers which often offset us emotionally and psychologically, and spontaneous possession occurs a lot. If you're a part of a cultural context, you know, if you grew up in voodoo, or if you come from West Africa and along the Yoruban coast, or if you grew up in Bali, or so many other indigenous places that are living traditions in the world today, if you grew up as a witch, perhaps with a family that dealt with drawing down. Often, if you're in the area, if you're going to be in a ritual ceremony, there might be emotional triggers that will, you know, if you're particularly psychically predisposed, will just alert your etheric body and allow you to open to the deity or to the spirit. Because generally speaking, a deity is not going to enforce itself on you. It might feel that way because you might have not had any previous context for it. But generally speaking, the deity is asking your higher self or your deeper self, whatever you want to call it, if it can come in. And you know, in a ritual context, if there is that trigger, you know, it might be the incense, it might be the candles, it might be the anointing with a particular oil, it might be the drums. If there is that trigger, you will generally be receptive and open, and your higher self will greet that experience, especially if you're consciously trying to invoke that experience. It will happen. So the technique today is what we call a conscious facilitation of the process. So what I'm going to lead you today to, there are 9 steps. The goddess didn't give it to us that way. She didn't go, here are 9 steps, because that's not how she works anyway. This is not any kind of cliche system, but we humanized it, so we created 9 steps based on the stages she gave us. She kept on saying when she came through, now I was the vessel for her at the time, so I don't remember, but there were people there who remembered for me. She kept on saying that 3 times 3, 3 times 3, and that's important to her. She's a lunar goddess, so triplicities are always important to lunar goddesses. She gave us it as a 3 times 3 method. In our tradition, we call it the 3 times 3 method. But that is what it is. It is 9 steps, and it's what it is. It's in the deepening process. So as you go deeper and deeper. It's almost like hypnotism. It hypnotizes the body enough for it to surrender and allow the experience to unfold naturally, and the rest is about mental triggers and psychological triggers and emotional triggers. And the most essential ingredient to allowing this experience to happen is surrender and letting go. As they say, let go and let the gods. Or let go and let God, depending on your theology. So that's the important thing, and I often find that when people are offended by this practice, or when people are perplexed by this practice, the thing they're perplexed about is the letting go part. They don't want to lose control. Unfortunately, that's what you have to do. It's not. You're not going to run into any danger. You know, we've cast a circle. We've acknowledged this as sacred space, which it inherently is. But we've condensed it, energetically speaking. We've sealed it for this work. If as with anything in magic, as with anything in life, if you come at it with pure will and pure intent, and open with pure heart and pure mind, the experience is generally going to be a revelatory or grounding experience. It might be harsh, it might be challenging, but we do not grow unless we have that dynamic tension, as I like to call it, and the contrast of previous and after. But the important thing is to be in the here and the now, as with any ritual, as with any magic, and to commune with that essence, and to also be open to surrender and to let go, and to allow the divinity to come through. So what we're going to do today is I'm going to take you to step 6, because I do not want a room full of gods. That is a dangerous thing. So let me say that. That's a dangerous thing, because not all deities tend to get along. If we're involving different pantheons especially, you will notice that the tension can rise, the conflict can rise, and why that might be an interesting experience, but it's not always going to be a safe experience. So I don't want to run us into that, because a few of us here don't have the context or the pretext for this kind of experience. But what we will be doing is I don't want to personally draw down. I could for you, but I don't want to. I'm the workshop facilitator, so I'm going to ask one of you who is comfortable in experiencing the entire onslaught to think of a deity that you would like to draw through. So hopefully a deity that you have some kind of relationship with. We'll work with deities today. They tend to be much more careful with you. And then I'll give you this seat. This can be the seat, and everyone will come. We'll bring you back to normal consciousness after we go through the technique as a group to step 6, and then we'll all be able to observe the energetic transformation that does occur, and it can be quite visible. It can be quite overt. It's also subtle. To those who feel more and sense more rather than see and hear, it will be a subtle thing, but you will definitely know. And those who can sense and see, you might be able to see them growing taller, growing wider, their eyes change, their hair change. Definitely the tone of the voice changes. Another thing is women and men, they can invoke and draw down spirits and gods that are considered of opposite gender. It doesn't matter. The gods will go through whoever they wish. Traditionally, some deities in various drawing down practices around the world and in prehistory, there are, for instance, the seer or the safe work of the Norse people, which is almost an oracular seership tradition. And what that is it's a pagan Nordic tradition in which the Shakona or the vulva, which is another word for her, she sits on a high chair, clothed in cat skin, and in gloves of, I think it's swan feathers. And there are animal sacrifices made, there are hymns sung by a court of priestesses. And through that kind of that call and response, which is very common in African and indigenous traditions as well, she is brought to a trance in which a spirit will come through, often Freya, because the Shakona and the seer tradition originates with Freya, who is the Nordic goddess of witchcraft, beauty, sensuality, fertility. She's considered a Vanir spirit, so a spirit of the earth, so a spirit that many people believe is more closely related to witchcraft, considering it's an earth tradition. So that, historically speaking, was a woman-centered tradition, but there is also records of the fact that Odin was taught the seercraft by Freya. Although in the Nordic tradition, which is a warrior tradition, men who who were taught seer or learnt seer were tended to be what the culture or society deemed as effeminate. So possibly gay men or that particular subset of gay men. Because often you'll find that in various shamanic cultures, gay, bisexual men and women were said to be closer to the spirits because they lived, their essence was almost like a combination of the gender energies or the sexual energies. So it's almost considered to be, if you were, like I know a lot of Native American tribes identify this, if you were seen as being a man not interested in women, you would have been observed from a young age and asked to go into the shamanship under the tutelage of that shaman or that medicine man or woman, because they could tell that you didn't want to be a warrior, you didn't want to procreate. So therefore the practicality of that and the functionality of that is for you to then take the role of the shaman, and because again, that unique mixture of energies. There are a lot of theories about this. All we can give is theories, but there is interesting history, so that's what I'm going to lay down for you. Now, I want to talk briefly about the Wiccan history, or the modern witchcraft history of drawing down. The very term drawing down comes from a Greco-Roman source, and I can't remember I think it's Horace maybe in the Latin, but definitely Greek writers speak of it too. But there was a technique that the Thessalian witches, so from Thessaly, which is a land that to this day in Greece is known for its witchcraft and its wilderness. There is a technique there that is called, from BCE, thousands of years ago, definitely pre-Abrahamic, a technique there called drawing down the moon. And it was known that the Thessalian witches, sorry, that's a bit of a word, tongue-tied, could draw the moon down. We don't know whether that folklore and myth speaks about the literal belief of drawing down the moon. I know Raven Grimassi speaks in his books about the fact that it was considered more of the essence of the moon, because there are techniques known, at least in Italian witchcraft, where a mirror was used to mirror the moon's light into a bowl of water, and perhaps that bowl of water was used for scrying, but also that it's for anyone who's ever done that, and I have, it entrances you immediately, especially for those who are natural vessel workers, natural intuitives, natural psychics. Just you go. But there's also the idea that the witches went out to collect the loam, which is this mythical substance that is white and foamy, that was believed that the full moon sent down to Earth, and if you collected it, it was a very powerful and potent magical ingredient in spells and potions. But the idea there is that it's an entrancing technique, and you're bringing down the very essence of the lunar spirit or the lunar goddess. So it translated into I guess British traditional craft, or the original Gardnerian tradition, as drawing down the goddess, the lunar goddess, the crescent crown triple mother of the tides, of the psychic tides. So in those covens, traditionally, it's only the high priestess who can do that. So she, she's in the Isis pose, and then she goes to the Osiris pose, because this is said to be a sealing gesture. You open and then you seal it. So you'll probably see a lot of pictures of witches who were in the early revival, like Janet Farrar, Patricia Crowther, Doreen Valiente, who are pictured or photographed in this position. And we all know this to be the Isis or All-Set position, the mother position, the goddess position, and then to close it, to seal it. So the idea there, though, is that the high priest invokes the spirit into the high priestess. This technique is more of a self-hypnosis. But for the person who does end up being the vessel, there are sacred invocations that I like to chant. In our tradition, we like to chant it into the ear, straight into the ear, because that closeness and the rhythm that we use and the tone of voice we use, we find to be quite hypnotizing. So you go under. So with drawing down, I find often that not everyone will get to authentic possession, or what we call authentic possession, where there is no memory, there is no sense of cognizance at that time for the vessel. There simply is the deity and they speak. The Covenant of the Goddess, it actually produced a document, I'm not sure how long ago, but it's quoted in a few books. I know Willow Poulsen quotes it in her The Veil's Edge book, which is a great book on the energetics and the technicalities of magic. If anyone's read it or not, read it, it's great. And it has a whole chapter on channeling and drawing down. But there are seen to be 4 stages of gradual deepening There's the inspiration stage, where it's simply seen as the deity is inspiring you or moving you or directing you to say certain words that are within its myth. So that's not possession, that's simply being inspired. So energetically speaking, picture the deity hovering in your aura somewhere. And then it gradually gets deeper and deeper, and then there's the deity in you. But if I like to use the car analogy, you're still driving, but they're backseat driving. They're like pointing you, directing you, telling you this and that. It tends to be deeper. Then they're sharing the front seat with you, and then they're in the front seat and you're in the back seat, and then you're locked in the boot. Authentic possession is when you're thrown into the boot. Okay, and that's interesting, because I've used that analogy for a long time, and I recently read a book called Drawing Down the Spirits by Raven Caldera and Phelan Kenaz. They're both practicing horses, which is a voodoo term for a vessel. And they use the same analogy, which I thought was great. So they call authentic possession being locked in the boot, being chucked in the trunk, I guess. So that's the idea. It's not a forceful thing. It definitely doesn't have to be a negative thing. One can interpret it that way, especially if one is unfamiliar with the energetics and with the context, with the experience in general. Some deities are really intense. They're really harsh. You know, Hecate comes through very harshly sometimes. Apollo is a very harsh divinity. But again, that's a personal thing. We all relate to them differently, and especially, you know, someone who has a personal relationship with Apollo, like for instance the Oracle of Delphi, she may not have had such a hard experience drawing down that god, because she did it all the time, and also she theory and studies suggest that she also had the help of some kind of noxious fume, which was coming from a fissure in the earth directly under the podium she was raised on. So there's that too. So
they believe today that it was ethylene gas.
Ethylene gas, there you go. And yes, that would definitely alter your consciousness. There are many ways to alter your consciousness, some of which I subscribe personally, and some which I say don't go near. A lot of people like to think that they could successfully use, you know, what we would call an entheogen now, but what used to be called a hallucinatory drug to get there: ayahuasca, peyote, marijuana. However, I feel that if you do not have the indigenous context, if you're not approaching those plants with understanding and respect, then there is no possible way that plant spirit is going to work with you, and it might, excuse my French, fuck you up. So there is that potentiality, and I've heard that happening a lot. Also, you don't need them. You know, you absolutely don't need them to alter your consciousness. The Gardnerian Eightfold Path, which has been published, but I'm sure is considered to be oath-bound law, so I feel fine talking about it right now. It gives 8 ways to power. All of those 8 ways to power are ecstatic. They're all ecstatic because they all invoke rhythm. There's the drumming, there's the dancing, there's the chanting. There is one called using wine and other drugs, but it's often seen to be the last resort. You can absolutely do it in a respectful manner, and you can have success. But again, there's that whole issue of respect, there's that whole issue of context, and also safety. So if you haven't been trained in a kind of indigenous tradition that has been using that particular substance for eons, then there's, I believe, no particular reason that we should be going there. Marijuana is another interesting thing because it has been absorbed so readily into the Western conscience, but again, it's not something that originated in a Western land. It's a desert plant that comes originally from the Middle East. So. And it's a lot of psychics and a lot of witches say that it does damage the aura because it's a very kind of forcing thing. So if one is going to dabble with any kind of drug, just do it recreationally and have that kind of respect. I think a lot of people forget that this is serious. Yes, be fun, have laugh. I think paganism is one of the few set of spiritualities that allows blasphemy. That allows reverent irreverence. We can laugh at our gods and they can laugh at us. We can have that relationship. That's healthy. But at the end of the day, also, what we're doing works and it is serious, and you don't want to damage yourself in the long run, or damage your community, or damage your friends and your loved ones by invoking an experience which could shatter you. For instance, there's a priestess, she's a Strega, in Victoria, in Australia, and she is one of the most powerful vessels. intuitive psychics I've ever met in my life, and she even has to take 3 months, you know, away from work after they have their festival euphoria, and she draws down the Baphomet because the Baphomet comes, and the Baphomet is a harsh deity and a very strong, intense kind of force. So after, you know, she often finds that after that happens to her, though it's always a positive and Gnostic and revelatory experience for everyone involved, she has to take the time to physically recoup after that, because sometimes the vitality in your body fights so hard to support your physicality while you're in that kind of transcendent state that it's too much, that it's almost like burning out the spiritual fire. I've also had that experience where I got sick for a week after being possessed by the haunted god of my tradition. It was at the time a wonderful positive experience, but I fainted afterwards, and I found myself really physically, violently ill for a week after that. That's the only time that's ever happened to me. So I'm not sure what I had to learn from that. Yeah, I'm not consciously sure yet, but I'm sure unconsciously it's beginning to process, because that wasn't that long ago. That was actually at Samhain for us, which was May. I don't know if you find that hard to believe, but so when you're celebrating Beltane. So there is that. There is all of that. So I hope you can absorb that. And again, you know, at the end of the day, what I'm saying is my experience and is my perspective. So please use yours, use your perspectives. Always be open, of course, to new experiences and adaptation and evolution, because that's the journey of spirituality. That's what we're here for. And humility is the way to be, is the road to true spiritual enlightenment. I think spiritual enlightenment happens every day. Don't think it's, you know, it's not the end of the road. It's not a goal. I think we cultivate spiritual enlightenment in our daily lives. You don't need to go to an ashram. You don't need to be an ascetic. You don't need to detach yourself from worldly pleasure to get to spiritual enlightenment. That's a very Eastern philosophy, and there's a value in that philosophy. But we're all pagan, I think, because we identify the fact that the spirit is manifest in this world. And we have the ability to touch that here and now, and to be transformed by it.